Cho sampo pa gyu trashi pa tu che tempe trile yarmo da pelge drolor zampe ze parace pande lame shabla solvade Omo a guru vajrada sumatimo nishasane karma Uta vardanya shri bhadra varsa manya sarvasi Oma guru vajradara sumatimo nishasane karma Uta vardanya shri bhadra varsa manya sarva siddhi hum Oma guru vajradara sumatimo nishasane Uta vardanya shri bhadra varsa manya sarva siddhi Jetsun lama tuje che nyamda dala tuje siksu su gebe shesan dala tendu su uyon sungi nawa tsetu seje nyingne sawa debe tse dechen korlo visu lekshu ne yila sambe dede malu pa geme hungi drupra jingil sonyi sadan dikdun shakbe tse dungi namge yinsu lekshu ne labchen sonyi yonsu tsoba dan chera nyetun chongra jingilo Chanchu pargi ninsen tukun tu nyu peme siru lekshun Chanchu drube gegen kunshi shi tungen de la drubra jingilo Dagi lona chola chomi samjur nimba shiwa Chedan tumbe dedun malu pa peme lungi drubra jingil Dorna tengne tsera tamche dan techi pardu nega tamche tu rese kyamne lama kele Tukche chingi dala siksu sol gongyab drewe nyamda dachala chetsun lame tuche rab gongne Kudan sungi nawa dralme tu nyam sunyongwe kesan topraishu Kewa kundu yanda lama dan drame cheki pela longchech Sadan lamge yende rab zon dorje changi koba nyur tobeshu Pakyuke akudan dagi lo pakyuke sundan dagi arma pakyuke atudan dagi Jin sogi chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi jinso gibe sonam gi rola penchere sange druparsho sange chodan sogi chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi jinso gibe sonam gi rola penchere sange druparsho sange chodan sogi chonam la chancho pardo dani kyapsu chi dagi jinso gibe sonam ki drola penchere sange druparsho. In the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, I take refuge unto enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. So, since a long, long time, since the very beginning, whatever time which we can remember or which we can enter in contact based on history of our human beings. Let's talk about what we can see, let's talk about what we can understand through our eyes, through history and so on. Human beings have always been in a quest, which we are now, ourselves since we were born, which our parents, our grandparents, the whole of humanity is now and have always been in a quest. It's a quest to be happy. It's a research for happiness. What can I do in order to be happy? What we all want, independently of who we are or where we live, every one of us, deeply inside, we have this strong, deep wish, which is not a conceptual wish, it's much more deep. It's in Italian there is a specific word which is Brahma, which means like a deep desire. We all have this deep, strong urge, this desire, this force, which is the desire to be happy and not to suffer. And then what happens is that it's important to go back to our roots, to understand that that's what we all want in the basis. Then, based on this, we have different types of ways that we believe that we can be happy. And very often in our societies there are conflicts, there are different points of view, but they are never conflicts because we want something different. The ideological conflict and so on, they come because we think of a different way how to get to the same point that we all want. Like in this moment in Brazil, but in many other places it happens the same. We're having a very strong ideological conflict in this very right moment in Brazil. But the conflict is not coming actually based on what we actually truly want for all of us. It's coming mainly because we think of different ways of getting the same. Different ways of actually finding our own happiness. And since, let's say, begin last time, from what we are able to see and to understand, that's what we all have been looking for. Some of us, we try to be happy through material development alone. Some of us, we try to be happy by gaining power and not caring about others. Some of us may try to be happy through developing more and more pleasures of the body and enjoying more and as much as we can, pleasures of the body. Some of us instead may try to gain happiness through spiritual development and meditation and looking for development of inner peace or whatever, But independently of what is the reason, independently of what we do on the basis there is this deep, strong urge to be happy. And based on that, I believe in a golden rule. The golden rule is, do whatever you do as long as it works. Okay? What do we mean as long as it works? Does it truly make you happy or not? Because if it really works to bring you happiness, satisfaction, well-being, then that's fine. You know, you like to buy a chocolate factory and live in it. It makes it truly happy. Wonderful. But if it doesn't, then there is no point in it. So, the whole point about Buddhism is not the fact of being Buddhist. If I talk for myself, it may look a bit strange, but personally, being Buddhist for the simple fact of being Buddhist, I really don't care about. The point is that Buddha shared with us a worldview, a pathway to reach this ultimate goal that we all want, of happiness, of well-being. And for me, it really works. I'm better than I was yesterday, hopefully worse than tomorrow. So gradually we can be better. Gradually we can reach a state of more peace, of more well-being. And it makes a lot of logic for me, and it seems to work. So the point is not being Buddhist, being part of a Buddhist group. The point is not acting like Buddhists. This actually doesn't really exist so much. Sometimes people say, you Buddhists shouldn't do this, you are Buddhist. Truly, the fact of being Buddhist is not a matter of external behavior. It's not something like, okay, now you want to be Buddhist, so you cannot do this, you need to do that, you need to dress in this way, you need to talk in that way, you need to do this behavior, you need to avoid that behavior. That's the most easy thing if we need to do like that. But the true way is to change our own worldview, is to change the way where we project our happiness, is to change the way how we see reality. So Buddha shared with us his own view of what is reality, his own view of what we need to do in order to reach happiness, what is happiness, how we can gain that, and all of that. So by following this view, that's what it actually means to be Buddhist. So, Buddha was not the first Buddha and was not the last. If we think even according to Buddha, his teachings, the Buddhist teachings itself, in this era in which we live, which making it simple is like the existence of one solar system, time. It says that like one planet within a solar system, there is a moment where it's born, it's developed, then it has a whole period, and then at one moment it gets destroyed. And then another one will be born. Actually, there are millions and billions of these different world systems at the same time. But it says that in the one in which we are, from the beginning of this planet, of this existence in which we are, until the end of it, there would be a total of 1,000 Buddhas. And Buddha Shakyamuni is the fourth. So before him, there were another 3, and there will be many more to come still. And normally it says that one Buddha will come when the teachings of the previous one have completely vanished away. This is what is said. But the point here is just to say that Buddha was someone that shared his wisdom, shared a way of looking for happiness and going through it that actually works. But sure, I cannot say work and then you just need to say yes, yes, we follow. We need to experience ourselves. We need to, based on our experience, share this worldview and see for ourselves, does it work or not? But the most important thing that I wanted to explain right now is that we must go back to our roots of what we really, really want in life, which is to be happy, which is to avoid suffering. You know? That's what we most want. So, what shall we do? How shall we act with our body, with our mind, with our speech? How should we live in order to be happy? This is fundamentally important. Independently of the fact of being Buddhist, not being Buddhist, or anything else. Okay? So, what I want to share with you these 2 days that we have together is some fundamental aspects from Buddhist teachings, which somehow explain the worldview, a change of attitude from our sides that I truly believe that can help us a lot to be more happy. That's the main issue. Okay? And it's very important for us to remember that on the basis we all want the same. It's very important because very often we get lost by the differences. Okay? I like fruit, you like chocolate, so we don't like each other. It doesn't work like this because what we actually want is to be happy. We all want the same, so we need to respect each other and find a way to get there. Okay? As we said, there have been already 3 Buddhas before Buddha Shakyamuni, according to his teachings, and there will be still many to come. But what we do in Buddhism is we try to follow the pathway that Buddha has taught us, which is, in other words, means to reach one's own state of well-being and happiness, and to help others to do the same. But if we would explain who was Buddha, there are many different ways in which we can explain who was Buddha Shakyamuni. Okay? There are many ways in which we can explain that. Even inside Buddhism, there are, according to different traditions, different stories, different ways how we can explain who was Buddha and so on. I like to share with you some of my own view. Okay? How I perceive it. And it's one part of the whole story, but for me a very important one. It's because we're not entering now into the whole details of Buddha's life and so on. Buddha was a prince in India. It's said to be around 2,550 years ago. Some other people say around 2,800 years ago. Each one of them have their own reasons why it's 2,500 or why it's 2,800. Sincerely, I don't care. The important thing is that nowadays we have Buddhist teachings from an uninterrupted lineage and we can access it and it's beneficial for us. That's the most important thing. Then in another context we can enter it to explain why 2,500, why 2,800. For me it doesn't make any much difference anyhow. Both of them actually looks quite feasible. I prefer the 2,800 version, but it doesn't matter. Okay? Who was Buddha, basically? One of the views is that Buddha was a prince called Siddhartha. And he had one quality, according to my own view, which is a quality that mostly we will not see being described whenever you take a book talking about Buddha. But from my own perception, he was on the same search that we all are for happiness. But he never ever accepted the fact that somehow we must suffer. Most of us, we want happiness, but we know that where we look for happiness doesn't bring us a true, constant state of well-being and happiness. It's momentarily, but we don't know any other way, so we say, okay, it's like that. And we are used to live in the roller coaster of life, of happiness and sadness and happiness and suffering, and we go up and down. We know that. We know that the places in which we project and we place our own happiness cannot truly sustain it, but we don't know other ways, so we say, okay, fine, better to be little happy sometimes, and sometimes suffer, than never to be happy, no? It's like one time I went to talk about Buddhism in a school in Milan. It's a story I tell many times because it touched me very strongly when I went there. This is a moment which touched me very much. I was in the school and I was invited to talk to these kids, and there were around 200 kids. I arrived in the school. Whenever I go to somewhere that I'm invited, most of the times I really don't know where I am going. I just, okay, I'm invited, I go. And this time I went to the school, I had no idea which context I needed to talk. And I arrived there and there was like around 200 kids from 5 to 7 years old. And there were the teachers sat around. It was a big room with a wooden floor. I was sitting on a wooden bench, and there were the other teachers on the benches and all the kids sitting in the floor. And I asked the teachers, and so now what do you expect from me? And they said, no, please, you explain Buddhism. Introduction to Buddhism, how long? 1.5 hours. And I said, okay, let's try. And so I started explaining the Four Noble Truths, the basis of Buddhism, in a very, very, very simple way. Actually, not so much different truly from what I explained in other contexts. But the really nice thing of talking to small kids is that whenever you make a question, they answer in a chore, like in a group. They all answer together, no? It's really nice. So at that moment, at one point, I was explaining the causes of suffering to them. I was explaining the meaning of desire. So I asked the kids, oh kids, is there any toy that you would like to have? And they all answered, yes. Have it ever happened in your birthday or in Christmas that you got the toy that you wanted? They all said, yes. Were you happy? Yes. How long did your happiness last? Long or short? Short. Do you still have the toy? Yes. Does it make you happy as before? No. Do you want another toy? Yes. How long is the new toy going to make you happy? Long or short? And they looked to me like this, and finally they said, short. You know? These were not special kids. They were normal kids, as we all have been. And we all know, since we were kids, that material things cannot sustain our happiness. They can make us happy momentarily when we get it, but after though it doesn't sustain it. We all know that. Truly, deeply, we know that pleasures cannot sustain our happiness. We know that power cannot sustain our happiness. We know that material things cannot sustain our happiness. But we always change toys because we do not know other games. That's the only game that we know. We do not know any other way how to be happy. So finally we say to ourselves, okay, I know suffering is part of life, but better to have momentary pleasures and happiness than nothing, you know? Buddha didn't do that. Buddha said to himself, okay, pleasures are pleasures, wonderful, but that's not enough. And I don't want to be in this roller coaster of happiness and suffering. I must find a way in which I am stable, in which I have a satisfaction and a happiness that is non-changing. And Buddha himself, he experienced all the mundane pleasures that we can imagine. Okay? When he was 15 years old, it was said that his father gave to him an arrow. So he had all the pleasures that we can believe of the body, pleasures of having power, pleasures of all the material things that of the time, everything that we can imagine at the time, he had all. But he saw that he was somehow being trapped. He saw all these pleasures and the power and the money and all of that as a trap. A trap to what? Being trapped in this momentary illusion of happiness that sooner or later will come down. Based on our own experience. What was the, have we ever felt happiness? I would say yes. No? But how long does it last normally? Have we ever felt happiness that was sustained for 1 week? It ever happened that, okay, I am so happy, I'm completely satisfied, everything it is just as I wished, and I remain like that for a whole week without moments of suffering or insatisfaction? No. One day, difficult. So our true experience is that we have moments of happiness, we have moments of pleasures, and that's nice and wonderful and nothing wrong about it, but they cannot be sustained. So we are happy, And then suddenly something happens, or nothing specifically happens. And there again, we are with insatisfaction, with sadness. Maybe there we are, everything is beautiful and happy. Then suddenly we remember something of what happened, or we create an expectation of something else. And there we are again, in fear, in sadness, in jealousy, in envy, or whatever other feeling. And then we are feeling miserable again. And then suddenly something happens, or nothing specifically happens, and we have a thought or something, and we are happy again. Okay, that's how we live. And Buddha said to himself, I don't want to live like that. I do not accept that things must be in this way. There must be a way out to find a constant state of well-being and satisfaction. So he left the palace. Nothing against his parents, nothing against his father. His mother had already passed away. Nothing against his wife and his son. But he went to look for something which is, he understood that the research was needed to be inside of himself, but outside of this trap of all these pleasures and so on. Again, nothing against pleasures. But he needed to research within himself, because he recognized that the state of happiness or suffering doesn't come from the conditions of the world in which we live, but mainly it comes from the way how we live the world in which we live. So making a long story short, after a long process, Buddha, he reached what we call enlightenment, which in few words is, he reached this state of well-being, of happiness, of peace, which was permanent and stable. In other words, it means he developed wisdom, he eliminated the ignorance, which means he could experience and see reality in a very consistent manner. He had love, compassion, satisfaction. He had no more anger, no more jealousy, no more envy, no more fear, and so on. And what Buddha did in his life, when he reached enlightenment, he was around his 40s, or I think he was at 40 years precisely. And he passed the next 40 years traveling around, and whenever anyone asked him something, he would answer back and share his experience, sharing with each one according to their mentality, according to their capacity, how to reach that same state of peace and well-being. Buddha never went to someone, from what we know, to say, oh, you must do like this because I am the owner of the truth and you need to follow this way. That's why in Buddhism, up to now, we don't have, there doesn't exist, so how to say in English, proselytism. There is no anything like wanting to convert others into Buddhism, even because it would not even be possible to convert someone into Buddhism, because it is something that comes from within oneself. You cannot convert anyone truly into Buddhism. So what happened at the same time is that all the teachings that we have from Buddha nowadays, the written teachings, which were transcripts of what Buddha said by his disciples, they all start like this. Once upon a time, at a certain time, I have listened in this way. I was at the feet of Buddha in this and that place, and at that moment, this person made this question to Buddha, and he answered in the following way. And like this it goes. So it's always based on a question, then Buddha gave his answer. So Buddha never presented himself as like, I am the owner of the truth, and if you follow me, you will be happy, everything will be well. He said, look, if you do this, 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 and that, if you change your view, you will be better. If you're doing that way, it will be worse. And he will adapt to each person. He will adapt to each mentality in accordance to their needs. Okay? So, what I like to do these days is to share 4 fundamental aspects of Buddha's view. Because the main issue is transforming our own worldview. That's the main issue. And Buddha, out of his kindness, he shared with us his own worldview.
And what we try to do, to follow, because I believe it works. Okay? So what I want to do in these 4 days is take 4 fundamental aspects of Buddha's worldview and share with you, so that gradually we try to apply it to our own lives. That's the main part. Okay? Well, just remember it. Lama Ganchen, whenever he starts speaking, he always starts with so, no? And one time he said, I start always with so, because it's from mal so, and so in Tibetan means regenerate. No? Anyhow. Many people sometimes they ask, oh, what is Buddhism of religion, or is Buddhism a philosophy of life? And I see people discussing and saying, no, I know Buddhism is not a religion, Buddhism is a philosophy. Most of the times when people say this is because for whatever reason they don't like religions and they like Buddhism. So, personally, if Buddhism is a religion or if Buddhism is a philosophy of life, I don't care so much. In the sense that most of the times when we see people talking in this way, most of the times really we don't even know what it means of a philosophy of life and what we truly means by religion. It's just some concepts that we have there and so on. So, there are religious aspects, there are philosophical aspects, and so on. But before we enter into that, the important thing, first of all, is to understand that what is a philosophy of life? Philosophy of life is basically beliefs that dictate, that form up, that build our worldview. These beliefs, they can be based on what someone told us, or what we read, what we listened by someone that have told us. They can be built based on our own experience, like fire burns. Why? Because I touched it. And they can be based on our own logical reasoning. Okay? So we have a set of beliefs which are based on what we were told, on what we experienced, and based on our own logical reasoning. This is normally this set of beliefs that we create. Finally, it determines the way how we see reality and how we relate to the world. Okay? But the first step, which is fundamentally important according to me, is that we must understand that actually we do live within a set of beliefs. We do live within a paradigm. Because the most common thing is that we all live within a paradigm. But whenever we see someone that is in a different paradigm, we believe that the other one is wrong. And we believe that our paradigm is reality, full stop. So very often we lack on the understanding that we actually live within a paradigm, that we have our own worldview. The most common way is we think that our worldview is simply reality. So if someone has a different worldview, he is wrong. That's how we do normally. Okay? So the first step that we need to develop is the awareness that we live within a worldview. Because the worldview in which we live, the paradigm within which we live, it's not that it influences our life. It determines our life. It determines the way how we experience reality and we act in our life. I'll make a few examples. Without entering in what is right and what is wrong, just making a few examples. If I live my life believing that the life exists only in this body, in this life. So birth is the beginning and death is the end. This is a paradigm. Okay? Which is based on maybe logical reasoning, or maybe something that someone have told me, based on the culture which I grew up and so on. And then there is the other paradigm in which we may believe that birth is just a continuation of a previous life, and death is just a passage to another one. Just like waking up in the morning from a previous day and going to sleep to wake up into the next. Okay? If I see life as this body, this single life, or if I see life as a passage from a previous to the next, Does it change the way how I experience reality and I relate to situations and things or not? Completely. For instance, if I believe deeply that I will be reborn and I can be reborn in the same environment and place, will I take care of the environment in a different way? Supposedly. If I believe that when I die everything finishes and I am really depressed and I'm really not well, how do I see death? As freedom. Finally it will end. If I believe that my life is wonderful, I love my life even though it has some difficulties, and death is the complete end of everything, oh, don't even talk about death to me, you know. But instead, if I truly believe that there is continuation after death, and I am really depressed, it's not a solution because I continue. On the other way, if I am really well, and then I see upon there is death in front of me, but there is continuation, okay, I don't like so much the idea, but the important thing is that I continue. So I see it in a different way. It's just one example of many that we can give. For example, the other view is that actions, they bring results only momentarily, or they bring results on a long-term run. If I believe that the actions that I do, they will just bring the direct, momentary results, then, you know, I do something, nobody knows about it, nothing happened, finished. If I believe that every action that I do, I am fully responsible for it in the long run, and that someday I will experience the result of my own actions, does it change the way how I act? Hopefully, yes. Actually, it does. But the important thing that we need to understand is that when we talk about the beliefs, when we talk about the worldview, when we talk about our paradigm, it's not conceptual. Actually, it exists in both levels. There is a worldview on a conceptual level, what I believe, what I think. And then there is the beliefs on a very deep, spontaneous level. Sometimes they are contradictory. For example, I may conceptually believe that there is reincarnation, but deep inside myself I am not sure, so better to act taking care of this life. What we really talk, when we talk about the paradigm, we are talking about the deep aspect of our mind. What it comes spontaneously to us, not what conceptually we believe or not. That's what we need to change. Because to believe in something conceptually, but to experience it deeply in a different way, which one talks strongly? If we put on a scale, what we experience, what we truly believe deep inside ourselves, not our conceptual beliefs. Okay? So, based on that, what happened is that, based on that, what happens is that first step is to understand that we do really live within a paradigm. This is very important. Because when I understand that I live within a paradigm, then this gives me the possibility to say I can change my paradigm. Otherwise, we constantly will try to change the world. One of the best ways to see our own paradigm is actually whenever we find ourselves in a situation in which we are confronted with a different culture, with a different reality, with a different paradigm, then we can see that we have our own paradigm. But most of the times what happens is that when people are confronted with a different paradigm, they just think that the other one is wrong because they don't see reality as I see. Okay. One exercise which I believe is very important, I have done it myself, but I think we need to go through it and to deepen it, each one of us, for our own selves, is to understand which are the roots of the paradigm within which I live. Okay. Which is the paradigm in which I live, which are the roots of it. And I have seen, I am generalizing, So maybe it may fit for each one of you or it may not. Okay? But generally speaking, I have seen that in our Western society, we have three main roots of our paradigm, which are the capitalist view. Capitalism is one of them. The other root is the so-called scientific view, which is the mechanicist view from Newton, very external way of how reality exists. Which, because nowadays in science, if we take to, for example, there are many different scientific views. One of them that we all know very well is the quantum physics. We all know very well in the sense that we know that it exists. It is in a complete different paradigm than the one most of us actually live. But the paradigm that actually influences most of us is the paradigm of this mechanicist view of this solid reality in which we live, in which the observer has no power whatsoever. And then we have the influence also from the monotheistic religion. Okay? At no moment I'm saying that these are bad influences. I'm just trying to make clear which are our roots. Okay? Some aspects may be good, some aspects may be harmful to our own well-being. But we must come from the point in which we understand, I live within a paradigm. Then, what we will do now is to start sharing with you 4 pillars or 4 seals of Buddha's paradigm. Buddha, what he did was he shared his paradigm. And to be Buddhist, truly, is not to be part of Buddhism. It's not to hear, okay, here I have my membership card of being Buddhist, and I can say from now on I am Buddhist. That's not the point. The point is that it's a shift of paradigm. So Buddha shared with us his paradigm, and then it's our work to understand it and to transform into our own paradigm. Because the paradigm in which we live is the result of the influences that we got from the culture in which we live, the education that we receive, the environment in which we grow and we live, or the experiences that we have had, and all of this. That's what shapes our worldview. Okay? And so, the point is that each one of us, we have our own worldview, and this is very good because this allows us to change it. So what is the process? Understand that I have my own worldview, understand which is the worldview that Buddha shared with us, and adapt and gradually transform our own paradigm, transform our own worldview, which is not something that we do in a weekend, or in a month, or in a year. It's something that takes lifetimes. But gradually we can do it. Gradually we can make an effort, and it's possible to change a lot. So what we will see today and tomorrow is these 4 pillars, these 4 seals, which are the seals that any philosophy of life, any worldview, because after Buddha passed away, there were many divisions of Buddha's teachings of different types of philosophical schools. There were mainly 4 philosophical schools, and the first one, for example, is divided into 18 different schools. The reason for that is because Buddha taught in different ways to different people. And after, it's not because they divided because they fight between themselves. No. They got divided because they said, okay, Buddha taught me this. Oh, but to me he said something else. Okay, so you follow what he said to you, I follow what he said to me. That's all. And by that, all these different schools created. In Tibetan Buddhism, we study all the different schools, which are basically 4, and then each one of them, they are divided, and so on. That's why also Buddhist studies take so long. Normally we are talking about from 18 to 25 years of study normally. So, not weekend studies, full-time studies. And what happens is that we see that even though they look contradictory, they all take to the same place, and finally they reach the same result. That's why they are not contradictory, because they bring to the same place. But Buddha taught in different ways according to the different capacities and needs of each one. That's all. So, these 4 seals are actually like, if we put 4 stamps, 4 seals, which says any philosophy, to be a Buddhist philosophy, must have these 4 aspects. Any paradigm, to be a Buddhist paradigm, to be following the paradigm of Buddha, must have these 4 seals. It doesn't matter if we are into Tibetan Buddhism, Korean Buddhism, Japanese tradition of Buddhism, or Theravada, or any tradition that we will go, it must have these 4 seals. Okay, then sure, each tradition, they will explain it a little differently, that's normal. But on the basis, there are these 4 points which are fundamental. But they are fundamental for our lives, which means, do we really want to change our paradigm? These are 4 points that we need to focus our energy. They are fundamental. They are not like detailed. They are fundamental pillars of our own paradigm. Okay. So now we'll go gradually through each one of them. Okay. So repeat after me. I just give you the transmission of these 4 seals, the short verse. The very simple way. Okay. We follow tradition. So repeat after me. Duche tamche mitakpa. Sakche tamche dungalwa. Che tamche tongshin. Dakmeba. Nyangele debe shiwao. All composed phenomena are impermanent. All impure phenomena are of the nature of suffering. All phenomena are of the nature of emptiness and lack an autonomous existence. Beyond suffering is peace. So these are the 4 seals. So traditionally, when I receive the teachings, it's first given like a root text, like the essence, and then from that comes all the commentaries. So once we memorize the root text, after we can connect to the whole teachings that come after. Okay, so repeat once again with me. All composed phenomena are impermanent. Everything that is impure is of the nature of suffering. Everything that is impure is of the nature of suffering. All phenomena are of the nature of emptiness and lack an autonomous existence. Beyond suffering is peace. Okay. The first seal says, all composed phenomena are impermanent. And there are 2 ways that we can actually go through the 4 seals and through most of Buddhist teachings. But specifically today we are going to see the 4 seals. So there are 2 ways that we can go through it. One way is we explain only Buddha's view, and which is wonderful. And we'll say, okay, what does it mean that all phenomena are all composed phenomena are impermanent? That's wonderful. The other way is that first we go through our own paradigm, and then we go to the paradigm that Buddha have taught that is opposite to it, sort of antidote to it. Okay, I prefer this way because the let's call danger of the other way, which is also beautiful, is that we listen to the way of Buddha's view and we listen to Buddha's paradigm, but then we forget to connect that to our own worldview. And it becomes something sort of parallel there somewhere. Oh, well, look how beautiful what Buddha said. But we need to touch it into our own view. So let's start by seeing how we see things. Okay. So the first seal says, everything that is all phenomena, all composed phenomena are impermanent. Now, how do we see the reality, the world in which we live, the reality around us? Does it appear to us, do we relate to it as being permanent or as being impermanent? Not in a conceptual level, but on a more practical level. Let's make some examples to help us to understand better. We meet each other today, and then we are going to meet again tomorrow, or we are going to meet again in a week, or in a month, whatever. Who do we expect to meet the next time? The same person or someone changed? Normally, the same person. We go to a place where we have not been for some time. Even we enter this room today, tomorrow we come back here, or in a month's time we come back here, or in a year's time we come back here. Which place do we expect to see? The same place as before, or a changed place? Normally we expect to see the same place. What happens when we see changes? We get amazed. We say, wow, look what happened. How incredible. When is a change that we think is good, we feel like, oh, that's incredible what happened. It's so different than before. When it's a change that we don't like, we may say, oh, look how unjust, how terrible, how come this is like this, it shouldn't be in this way, and so on. You know? When we suddenly look at ourselves in the mirror, and for some time we have not been looking at ourselves in the mirror with attention. And then after some time we look at ourselves and we say, oh, how come, what happened, you know? Or we say, oh, look, I look beautiful. Or we may look at it and say, oh, that's not okay, you know? And we think, how come this is like this? So it's strange enough, but we normally get amazed by impermanence. We get like somehow shocked when we are in contact with impermanence, when it manifests clearly to us. Okay, in any level. How come? You know, 1 year ago I would have never liked this. Now I really like it. Isn't it strange? No. We are impermanent. Everything, including ourself, our identity, our body, our mind, the world in which we live, is constantly in transformation. To be impermanent doesn't mean that now it exists and at a certain point it will not exist anymore. To be impermanent, it means that it is constantly in transformation. The definition in Tibetan is said, Kechi Kechi Gi Jikpa. Kechik means instant, moment. Jikpa means transform. Kechi Kechi Ki Jikpa. That is transforming from moment to moment. From instant to instant is in transformation. If we analyze, is there anything that we can see and perceive that is not constantly in transformation? Or things change suddenly? Actually, if we analyze, we will see that everything is constantly in transformation. But still, when we look at people, when we look at places, when we think about people and places and situations and our own selves and our body and our mind and everything else that we perceive all the time, how does it appear to us? As being permanent or as being impermanent? You know, when we're going to meet someone, do we expect to meet the same person? Or we say, okay, no, I'm going to meet that person. Oh, but sure, you know, after this time, sure, you have changed because you have been interacting with so many people. Are we aware of this? Normally not. And so there is this amazement when we see impermanence. Okay? So what is really somehow shocking is that even though when analyzing, we all understand very easily that we live in an impermanent reality, still, it appears to us in a non-conceptual way as being permanent. We believe in it, and we relate to it as if it was permanent. So when something changes, suddenly we perceive the change in something. or we blame someone, or we look for someone to blame, or we think that there is something wrong with it because it's not that it was supposed to be before, or we think it's a miracle that something's beautifully changed. But actually, that's just nature. And why things change? Because they are constantly interacting with each other. Impermanence, change, is a result of interaction. The stronger is the interaction, the faster will be the change. The stronger will be the change. Why do we change? Because we interact. Why our body changes? Because it's constantly interacting. And the way how it changes is a result of the interactions that it has. So my body, for example, it is constantly changing, but the way how we will change, the direction in which it changes, is the result of what I eat, of the way how I sit, of the exercises that I do or I don't do, of my emotions, of the environment in which I am, and all of this put together, of my DNA or whatever, of all the things put together, they interact with each other, and then it makes the transformation. Everything is like this. So this means phenomena to be composed. A composed phenomena means something that exists out of interaction. Something that doesn't exist in a way that is autonomous from the rest. It exists out of interaction. That's what's the meaning to be composed. Everything that is composed is impermanent, which means it's constantly changing. Beautiful. But how do we experience it? That's where the change needs to happen. For example, aging. How do we accept normally the fact that we are all aging? Generally speaking, society not so well. When we listen, with talking to people, it's difficult. People say, oh, I'm happy that I'm aging well and beautifully, Or we just say, okay, aging is part of life. When do we start aging? The first instant after we are conceived, Actually, when we are born, we are already 9 months old. And as life goes on, we are constantly aging. That's a natural process. And our body, our mind, it's being transformed in accordance to all the interactions that we have had. That's how it is. That's how it's the natural things. But what happened? We do not perceive it as such. Still, it appears to us as if it was permanent, and we believe in it, and you relate to the world as if it was permanent. So we suffer when things change, or we get amazed by it, and this generates a lot of suffering. Okay. So what does it mean of interaction? That's what we mean also by karma. Action. And the question that comes together with it is, can we make something so things stop changing? Can we do anything so that reality in which we live, it stop being always into transformation? Can we stop impermanence? No. So where is our freedom? In interaction. We can choose in the present moment how to interact. I can choose, do I drink water or I don't drink water? The water that I drink interacts with my whole body. The body interacts with the mind. The mind interacts with the actions. The actions interact with the environment and other people, and then after there are results, and like this we can go on and on and on. So at the present moment, we have freedom to choose our actions. We'll talk more about that later, but basically, yes, we do have freedom to choose. I drink or I don't drink. I say or I don't say. I go or I don't go. I manifest or I don't manifest that emotion. We have freedom. And that's where our freedom lies, in the interaction itself, because depending on the way that we interact, it will transform in a different way. So in other words, impermanence is actually freedom of choice. Because phenomena change because they interact, and we have freedom in our interaction. It's not that things change and we are completely like a victim of the impermanence. No, we are the main, what do you say in English, the protagonist, we are the protagonist in this whole impermanence. Because we are interacting through our own choices. So when we say in the first seal, all composed phenomena are impermanent, inside of this we have the law of karma, interdependence. All this lies within it. Okay? And surely impermanence. And but the first step that we need to understand clearly is, how do I perceive reality as being permanent or as being impermanent? Not in a conceptual level, in a direct experiential level. And what we see, based on the examples that we gave, and we could go on the whole day making other examples, reality appears to us as if it was permanent. We believe in it, and we relate to it as if it was permanent. And this is called ignorance. It's one form of ignorance. Ignorance in Sanskrit is called avidya. The word used for ignorance in Sanskrit is called avidya. The etymology of the word is that a is a negation, vid means to see. Avidya, not to see. Okay? So what are we not seeing in this case? We are not seeing the impermanence of impermanent phenomena. That's why it's called ignorance. What is the wisdom in this case? To see impermanent phenomena as being impermanent. That's wisdom. Wisdom is quite simple actually. It's just to see things, in a consistent manner. Is it impermanent? Yes. So if I see it as being impermanent, that's wisdom. Is it impermanent, but I see it as being permanent? That's ignorance. Okay? So the first step is understanding how does it appear to me. And when we start analyzing and we start observing how reality appears to us as being permanent, we see how crazy we are somehow. We see how much, how crazy, because, okay, we live in an impermanent reality, but we don't accept it, and we still live it hoping that it will be permanent. And then what happens is that when we are confronted with change, we feel a victim. When this is just the way how things are. And we are the actors within it, because we interact within it. Okay? So this is basically the first part, the first seal. That it opens a whole world. Karma, interdependence, and so on. But we will go now one step after the other, okay? So I think this first point is quite clear, right? And it is really important for us to look within ourselves and to see how do I relate to reality, in a way how it was permanent or impermanent. And the objective is to see how inconsistent is our own way of seeing, so that we can start making an effort to change it. Okay? And at no point we need to blame ourselves, oh, look how bad I am. No, nothing like that. Simply, we are ignorant, fine, let's change it. Okay? Well then. So, it's clear that even though we live in an impermanent reality, still it appears to us as if it was permanent. Why? Why the impermanent reality appears to us as if it was permanent? There is a detailed explanation about it, which is called the explanation of the subtle impermanence. But before entering into that, I would like first briefly to explain the gross impermanence. So when we give the explanation about impermanence, normally it's divided into two parts: gross impermanence and subtle impermanence. The gross impermanence is the fact that everything that begins, sooner or later, ends. That whenever there is birth, sooner or later there will be death. But not only from the point of view of life and death itself, it's from everything. And whenever something ends, what happens actually? Whenever there is death, there is birth. When something ends, something else begins. If I take this glass, before it was not a glass, it was sand that was transformed into glass, and it was made into this shape. And if I break it completely, what it will become? Pieces of fragments of glass, not more a cup where I can drink. Okay? So, what happened, that's why it is also said, nothing begins and nothing ends. All is constantly transforms. There is no beginning, there is no end, there is just constant transformation. If I do, I can make the sound, I can give birth to the sound, and I can kill the sound. But when I kill the sound, I give birth to another sound or to silence. Which means that everything that begins sooner or later ends, everything that starts sooner or later ends, everything that is put together sooner or later will be divided and separated. In the moment that we meet, we already start a process to be separated. And when we are separated, we are creating the conditions to meet again. Okay? What do we mean when we say that actually something started and something ended? There is birth and death. Basically, is the fact that we have, for example, parts put together into one concept that puts them together. So I have the concept of a cup where I drink water. Okay? So I have this concept of a cup. What happens in the moment that I break it? The parts that are here cannot sustain anymore that concept. So the cup is dead. Then it has become something else. So whenever something ends, because the conditions of the unity of the parts cannot sustain anymore that mental concept, actually it gives birth to new mental concepts that are sustained by the unity of the parts. That's why we say nothing begins, nothing ends, all transforms. But at the same time, yes, things begin and things end, because we relate to things through concepts, and suddenly something cannot sustain that concept anymore, so that thing is gone. Okay? But the first level is understanding that everything that begins ends. When we are born, this means that we will die. The first moment that something begins, it's already showing that sooner or later it will end. And there is nothing wrong with it. That's how things are. And the death or end is the beginning of something else. Like this is for everything. We can look about the empires of the past. We can look about anything. Oh, but how come these people were so rich, now they are poor? Those that are rich, sooner or later will become poor. You know, richness, which is things put together, sooner or later will be divided. Sooner or later things will be put back together in another way. You know, that's constantly how things are. So to understand the gross level of impermanence is to understand that everything that starts ends. Everything that gets gathered will be divided. That's how things are. So this is the first level of impermanence, which is to truly accept it and understand it. It's already a lot. It's already very special. It means we have no more conflict with death. This means we are in peace with a lot of aspects in our life, if we really accept and understand that clearly. Okay? Now, why things change? That's subtle impermanence. That's what we are going to go now. So, to conclude for this morning, we will see briefly what's the meaning of what we call subtle impermanence. Subtle impermanence, it's not so easy to explain in few words, okay, in a short time, but I will make my best. Um, To understand subtle impermanence, we must first understand that there are impermanent phenomena that are constantly in transformation. And there are permanent phenomena also. Permanent phenomena are those phenomena that actually are not constantly in transformation. Let's make an example. The general concept of impermanence. Okay? What is impermanence today? The constant transformation of phenomena. Okay? And yesterday, what was impermanence yesterday? The constant transformation of phenomena. And what was impermanence 10,000 years ago? The constant transformation of phenomena. It's not that impermanence had been changed and there is an old impermanence and a new impermanence, and that impermanence is different from yesterday and today. So the general concept of impermanence is permanent. Okay? The general concept of impermanence is permanent. And like this, it is for every general concept, which is also called generalized meaning or general meaning. Or in other words, I prefer to use the word mental image. Basically what happens is the following. Anytime that we experience anything, we relate to every situation, to every person we meet, to every phenomena that we perceive. We relate to it through a mental image that we create. Okay? We have a general concept of that. Like when we meet a person, do we have our own image of the person or not? So when we go to meet again that person after 1 month or 1 year or 1 day or whatever, who do we expect to meet? Someone new or that person that we met before? That one that we met before. Basically, I go to see you again, so I expect to see who? The mental image that I have created. So actually we relate mostly to the mental image that we have of people, not really to the people themselves. Okay. Now, let's make an example. I always give the same example because it works. Okay? We look to this tissue. Can you see it well? Right? We see one side is a little bit not cut so well, the other side is straight. We can see the size of the paper. We can see that it's a bit transparent. We can have many different details. The more we look at it in details, the more we analyze it, the more we create a mental image that has more details. Okay? A more detailed mental image. So when we think about it, can now we imagine this tissue or not? Yes, right? So can we access the mental image that we have of this tissue? Yes. So now, is the same tissue from before or not? Without philosophizing, just without philosophizing. Okay, just look at it and say spontaneously, is the same issue that I showed before or not? The same tissue that I showed before or not? Yes, right? And now? Also. Okay, I'm not going to go too long with this because we need to have lunch. Otherwise we could stay the whole day asking the same question. Okay? And now, is it the same tissue from before? Yes, right? And now? If you say that it is still the same tissue from before, you lend me your car, I give it back to you like that, and it says the same car. Okay? So, what happens is that actually, what happens is that if we look at it and we think, the mental image that we first created from the tissue, can we still access it or not? The first mental image of the tissue when it was complete. Can we still access it? Can we remember it in our mind? Yes. But can this object sustain that tissue, that mental image? No. Do we have a new mental image now? Yes. So, when did it change? When the mental image could not be anymore supported by it. So when the change is so big that the object cannot sustain anymore the mental image, that's when we perceive change. Until the object, the parts put together, can still sustain the mental image that we have, we see no change. We can only see change when the parts together cannot sustain anymore the mental image. So, the more our image is detailed, the more we can perceive change. Okay? Actually, every time I showed the tissue, was it different? Was it slightly changed somehow? Yes. It's like if we take, for instance, a flower. Does the flower dry from one instant to the other, or it's gradually drying? Gradually. But we do not perceive these changes because our mental image is more gross, more general. Okay? So why do we see impermanent phenomena as if they were permanent? Because we are totally incapable of seeing and relating to reality independently of the mental images that are permanent. We are incapable of perceiving impermanent phenomena independently of the mental images that are permanent. And we are not aware of it.
Lama Michel.
It's like, one second, sorry, just to finish the reasoning. It's like, for example, when we look to a mountain, a snow mountain, but we are using pink glasses. The snow mountain looks like pink. And if we are not aware that we are using pink glasses, we may look to it and say, oh, look at the pink snow mountain. Okay? But the fact is that what we are seeing is not a pink snow mountain. What we are seeing is the reflection that comes through our own glasses that are pink. Okay? But we are not aware of it. We are not able to perceive anything independently of the filter of the mental images that we generate ourselves. But we are not aware of that. And the fact is that we can create new mental images. But while they are there, they are not constantly interacting and they are not constantly changing. So what happens basically is that we live in the illusion that the object that we perceive should correspond with the mental image that we have. And because of that, it appears as if it was permanent, because the mental images are permanent. Okay? Are we able right now to go beyond that and have no more mental images and see the mountain without the glasses? No. Okay? This is what is a Buddha. One day we may reach that stage, but now not. At least for me. So what happens is that, what's the first step to do? Be aware that we are seeing reality through the filter of our own mental images that is permanent. So when we see change, instead of being amazed, we're just aware, we say, oh, look at that. I need to generate a new mental image because that's one is not fitting anymore to things. So we need to make a constant exercise of mental image updating. That we already do somehow, but we need to do it in a way in which we are aware of. So the fact that we see reality, every object of our senses, through the mental images that are permanent. In other words, we see impermanent phenomena through the mental images that are permanent. And we don't understand, we do not perceive this process. This makes us to see impermanent reality as if it was permanent. Okay? So, this is the explanation of what we call the subtle explanation of impermanence, or subtle impermanence. Here there is a lot to think, a lot to digest, okay? But for this morning we will stop here. To understand this point deeper, we need to go to the third seal, which is the nature of all phenomena are of the nature of emptiness and lack and autonomous existence. This will help us to understand this point deeper. But for now, we stay here. Okay? Bernard, please.
I was just going to ask, Lama Michel, you said that impermanence is permanent. Would it be more accurate to say that impermanence is enduring, because we can appreciate impermanence now? Historically, things have unfolded but in the future we are actually relying on mental projection that the continuum will unfold in the way that we expect. So using the word enduring reflects the fact that it is actually something which continues and we expect it to continue. To say that it's permanent actually then is applying a degree of mental projection into the future.
The concept of permanent here
Yes.
and impermanent is basically the fact if it is or it's not in constant transformation. And generally speaking, when we classify phenomena through Buddhist teachings, there is the whole classification of phenomena. The first is divided into everything that there is kansagedame, everything that lacks inherent existence, and what actually does not exist basically, but it's everything lacks inherent existence. Then from it we have the division into permanent and impermanent. Then inside impermanent we have matter, mind, and what is matter and mind. And then like this we can go on and on with the whole division of things. And then there is a part of the permanent phenomena. So basically there is a classification of phenomena as being permanent normally. And one example is not, we would not say that impermanence is permanent. What we say is that the general concept of, or the general meaning of impermanence is permanent. To make a more easy understanding, we would say that impermanence is permanent, but truly it's a general concept, which means at any moment, at any time, anyone that perceives impermanence will perceive the same fact, that is the lack of the constant transformation of phenomena.
Yeah, that was my point, which is it's unfolding.
So
I'm just wondering if enduring might be a more accurate description.
my English is not as good to understand
Well,
if it's more
enduring
precise.
means it's unfolding, whereas permanent means it's fixed.
Yeah, because like the problem that we have, I have very often, is that I use the word permanent from the Tibetan,
Yeah.
which has most probably a complete different meaning than the word permanent in English
Yes.
originally. So maybe, most probably in this case, it's better to translate as enduring and not permanent. For this we need to enter into more detailed study from the linguistic point of view of the meaning of it. Okay? But this is a big issue very often when we pass teachings of Dharma. We use words from our own culture and so on, which actually do not really translate what's the meaning that is behind. Like the word impermanence really doesn't mean the meaning of what is impermanent. Anyhow, so this is why I prefer personally to try to be a little bit free from the words and go more to the meaning, and each one can give its own word, but I think you are correct in this one.
Jetsun alame kutse rapten chi namkar tille chochur gepada losan tempe dreme sasungi drove munsel tautune nimo delle tsendele nime kuyande ninsen taktu dele pe Concho sunke jingelo, concho sunke madrotso,